Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to I Was Thinking with Robbie McElhaney, episode 15. And it's amazing to think we've been at this now for 15 weeks. You know, hit and miss. We have gotten a little bit more relaxed. It's something I wanted to do about the whole, we were really about a by Wednesday at midnight, we need to have it up. I think we have done a little bit better in terms of content and production, the more relaxed we've gotten. So I'm here enjoying a nice day off on this Wednesday. Was it May 13th? I got to see the movie Michael. For those of you that know me, I have a soft spot for Michael Jackson, and so got to go see the movie Michael. I thought it was a phenomenal film. If you haven't seen it yet and you like Michael Jackson, make sure you go and check it out. I got to do a little bit of shopping, but now we're here, ready to record an episode. One that I think is going to be kind of interesting. It's different. It's something that I think when I started to put together the idea of the show with Kate, I think this is something that maybe not specific topic wise, but definitely in terms of type of content, I think this was one that we had in mind, and just hadn't gotten to and kind of got away from with everything in terms of the draft and the end of the Steelers season and how that coaching cycle went and everything like that. We kind of stuck to the sports news. We're going to take it back to, I think, what we wanted the show to be about, which was some of my experience as a coach. So today what we're going to talk about, is partially just in the fact that coaching is not a seasonal job. All right, like I remember I was talking to somebody and they'd asked me, "Oh, have you been in banking? Do you have to go to school for banking?" I said, "No, I was actually a college football coach for better part of 10 years." And he said, "Oh, that's a full-time job." Yeah, it's a little bit of a task. So, but this episode specifically, we're gonna touch on what really the unseen part of the year. Everybody knows obviously fall camp through the season. You can guesstimate the recruiting cycle, but the untalked about part of coaching and of college football for that matter is spring ball through summer. And you're working in it. College football, especially now in the world of college athletics that we're in today, it's a year-round thing. And so, hoping to shed a little bit of light on that. First and foremost, I don't think I said it. Make sure you follow us on our social medias, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Catch us on YouTube and find us wherever you catch your podcasts. We are going to be better. I know I said it a couple weeks ago, but we are going to be better at putting things out on our social media. I kind of got away from that. I know this, we have a couple episodes now that have some interesting content. Hopefully we'll be able to share some from today, and some coming up. We're going to the Hall of Fame here next weekend, so we'll have some content from that. But a lot of exciting things coming up. Make sure you check us out. Make sure you stay up to date and follow us. Also, if you paid attention to last week, we talked about we are going to be starting and putting out a Patreon here soon. Make sure you follow us for that and just some information about what's coming up with that. All right, so what is spring ball? Because not everybody knows what spring ball is. It's becoming more popular with things like, I know in Pitt, at least it was talked about during the draft just because of the changes. But, the blue and gold game, the blue and white game at Penn State, or now the blue and white practice. A lot of people are moving towards that more practice model of it to wrap up the spring season. But what is spring ball? In my best definition, it is the fastest 15 practices you could go through. So, per the NCAA, you get 15 practices in the spring. Okay. Think of it as a condensed training camp of sorts. You have an install schedule. It's an opportunity to get new things in because, you've cliniced all winter. You've revisited what you did well and not so well in the fall, and now you're coming back to it in the spring thinking, what is it we want to accomplish, and you have some time to do it. And not only that, but you have some time to prepare for the fall, and you can say, what, let's see if we like it, let's see if it sticks, let's see if it works within our system, and you can try some different things, do some different things. But it is a fast-paced, condensed training camp almost, because you got scrimmages in the 15 practices. You have one or two, not including spring games, so one or two in squad scrimmages, 3 once you include the spring game / practice, however you do it. So now that's cut down to about 12 practices. You have to install, get your how you teach and work technique in, how you condition, how you operate as a program once you hit the practice field, once you hit meetings and different things like that, because that's all included. You have meetings, you have practices, all of that stuff is lumped into 15 days. So you got to make sure, and there are some things that you can do, and you have Kara hours. I've been out of it too long. I forget the specific number, but all Kara hours is what you're allowed to do together. So you get X amount of hours between meetings, practices, and competition, essentially. So you have to factor all that in, and that breaks down how you operate and do your spring. So that's all something to think about. But what else is it? It's a great opportunity for new coaches in a program and new players, especially in the world of the transfer portal, where you have a ton of mid-year guys now. So you have players coming into teams in the spring. So it's a great acclimation period for them, for new coaches that you bring on. I know when I got to New Mexico, it was in the spring. When I got to St. Vincent, round 2, it was in the spring. Valdosta was in the spring. That's, your typical coaching cycle. Now you may get there in the winter, like, in New Mexico, I didn't get there. I got there in the winter. So like it was February. All right. So I had some winter to meet with guys and be around the guys. But, our first on field experience is in the spring. And I think that's crucial to the success of a team, a coach that coaches players, just because it's so tough and it's not impossible. So I'm not saying this to write off the whole, you can't get hired after the spring. I think you can, but I think having that spring, those 15 practices are crucial to, implementing who you are as a coach, finding your place as a transfer, or, and a ton of high schoolers are now starting mid-year as well at the higher level of the sport. But it's also a great opportunity to, like I kind of talked about, what worked in the fall for us, what didn't work in the fall as an individual coach, what worked good for our group, what didn't work good for our group. Do we want to try this? Do we want to try that? It's a great opportunity for coaches to do some experimenting, and as well for players that are returning to kind of solidify their spot and make an argument and say, hey, I did this well in the spring. I had a great fall, had a really strong spring. Can we look at where things are headed for me? And it's a great evaluation period to see where you're at for young coaches. It when the spring is done, in my mind correctly, because I was honored to, I'm blessed more so to have enough springs under my belt to see it done differently by different head coaches. And to me, the ones that did it right, or the ones that gave coaches at every level in their staff some opportunity to grow. The spring is a great growth time, both for your roster and for your coaching staff. I know we had a ton of opportunity my second year at Valdosta, who, again, this was my second year at Valdosta. The first year was coaches on an ego trip. But my second year at Valdosta, I think we had selfless leadership that really put growth ahead of ego, right? So, I called a ton of plays, and some worked out, a lot didn't. And there are a couple different examples of that, and you learn how to be. I don't want to say you learn how to be a play caller, because there's a lot of lessons to pick up in that time frame, but you can kind of see, I learned that I can't be an emotional play caller, and because I get burned. I got burned. I was an emotional play caller. It was third and something. I was pissed off. I called a blitz, um, a zero pressure, so that everybody's going. There's nobody to help deep, and the young coach on the other sideline, that rightfully so is now a Division I offensive coordinator, um, knew to put it right over top of me, because I'm a pissed off, angry little man, so he's going to go right over top of me, and they score a 75-yard touchdown, because I thought, because I'm an emotional guy, um, and we talked about it. Not only did you get to play call it, but you had people charting it, so you could go back in and put the clip, or put your calls into film, and sit with the staff and say, well, like, that's a pretty good call. What were you thinking here? I don't know. I just got lucky. Okay, well, sometimes it's as simple as that. But sometimes, I knew so and so, we were handling this really well. I knew they were limited at this spot, so we went ahead with this, and you learn to explain it. In that case I just talked about, Rob, why would you do this? Um, it was the wrong call. I was just calling emotional. Well, you can't do that. This, and this, and I said, and I forget what exactly the play call was, but I know I said, if I could do it again, I would have been here, just because, and not that it would have been better, and that probably would have been, but there are times where you just, if I could have that one over again, man, I'd go here. And so you learn some different situations. Your more tenured coaches, your coordinators are different coaches at different levels. Can, once again, if play call, be a head coach. I know that's how we operated our spring game. My second year at Valdosta, both of our coordinators were like, it was red versus black, and our offensive coordinator was the head coach of one team, our defensive coordinator the other, and we just kind of went like that. Younger coaches coordinated, so everybody kind of learned game management and how to communicate between the staff, because I as a defensive play caller had to kind of have an idea what the offense was trying to do or what they needed, so I could, situational football. I was big into special teams. I know, that was the first time I'd really done any kind of personnel stuff in game situations. So that was an experience that I failed at, but you learn, and you're able to get a grip on what you're doing and how everything operates. And that's crucial, because you don't get that during the fall. And I mean, sometimes we had opportunities where, we'd have, our red shirts, or we'd call it a Scouty Bowl, where our scout teams would scrimmage. So your scout team offense versus your scout team defensive players, or your just lower tiered guys that don't get a ton of reps, but we need to see them, because that's the only way you grow. So we did get to play call and certain things like that in the fall, but a lot of that development has to happen in the spring, just for time's sake. So when it's done right, it's a great growth period for everybody, but it's also a really crucial time to see, where are we as a program, culture wise, you know, roster wise, all of these things considered. Where are we? What do we need? How do we need to handle these next couple months? Because what do you go into? Recruiting time, camps, showcases, different things like that, where you're on the road, but you're also recruiting. And so, that takes me to the next point. I think that was a pretty good example or description of what spring ball is, but what comes next? I think something, next is a week of eval. You sit there and, where are we at? What did we do well this spring? Where are we at as a program, as a defensive line unit? Where are we at? Do I need, anything, do I need to? The one thing I put on here is to be honest with your players, and that's something I think I learned along the way. A lot of people think you need to BS your way through things and sit and spare feelings, but I think the best thing you could do as a coach is be honest with where a guy stands. If he's not cutting it, he's not cutting it. I put on here it's a crucial time for both the program and the players on the roster because in the world of the transfer portal, right, it's different than it historically had been, where maybe you had to BS your way because if you don't, you're going to lose depth, and then you run into low depth problems and come fall with scout teams and different things like that. But I just think it's so imperative because in the world of the transfer portal, I think the simplest way to you can't hold your players hostage. You can't. I do think, though, in like manner, that your players can't hold a program hostage, right? If they're not going to add any kind of benefit, they can see themselves out, and you kind of have to. It kind of sounds mean, it sounds rude, all these things, but you kind of have to have that honesty within your program. And if you don't, do you really have a good, strong program? So just those kind of things to think about. It's imperative in that time frame that you be honest with your players and you be honest with the state of your program. Because what comes next is spring recruiting. So now we see where we're at. We know guys are going to transfer. We know guys are going to stay. What comes next? What do we need to get to be successful? I need at least two transfer tackles and two ends. If I can get four more guys, two interior, two perimeter guys, I'll be all right. That was something we had to kind of consider. What do we have coming in high school? That's the other benefit to spring ball is that you have your high school class locked and you know who's coming. So we have these young pups. But that's the other thing with the transfer portal that I'll talk about a little bit more in detail here in a little bit, where how are we going to attack the season? We have a pretty veteran group coming back. The spring was good. We have this core group of veterans. We don't need a ton of experience. We have some young guys coming in to fill in the cracks. Some we feel really good about. Some are going to take some time, but we have a core group of older, experienced players. We don't need to attack the transfer portal, or we had a ton of guys leave, or we're just a younger group. It wouldn't hurt to go get a couple of experienced players to come in and shape this group and be the leaders. Sometimes you need to implant leaders. Sometimes you have guys that are natural leaders that you don't need to go pursue leadership for. So there's a ton of different things, but you have to have a clear, idea. And coming out of the spring is a great time to kind of say, okay, there's, these kind of people left, and I don't know, what the calendar is anymore. It's ever changing, so I don't know. I can't tell you what spring recruiting, looks like anymore. But you can correct a ton of issues from the spring with spring recruiting and what's left in the portal. Okay, now we move on to camp and showcase season. So now you're looking at, okay, spring ball ends between middle and end of April. It's usually done middle to end of April. May, you have graduation, you have, finishing up your recruiting and things like that. When you get into camps and showcases, you're A, hosting camps, you're B, going to camps, doing satellite camps. It is a non-stop sprint, essentially. That and a lot of it too is you're planning vacations and stuff like that. So it becomes tedious. But this honestly was one of the least favorite times of, my year, just because, especially being a younger coach, you're running a ton and you're sprinting around and doing all these different things for camps. Like I was back and forth between Alabama a couple of times. I went to Troy, I went to Tuscaloosa, I went, all these places. Did I go to Tuscaloosa? I don't think I went to Tuscaloosa. Where did I go in Alabama? I didn't go to Tuscaloosa. I went to Troy. I know for sure. Um, but you'd go down into Florida, you'd go, North Georgia, all these different places, fairs, different things like that. But um, and then on top of it too, I said you're hosting camps. Somebody's in charge of that. I know at St. Vincent, I with a ton of help put together our camp, and it's just a lot, and there's a ton of you know I's you got to dot and T's you got to cross, and it's not a fun thing all the time, but it's a great opportunity for high school athletes to get in front of coaches, especially in the world of the transfer portal. A lot of in-person recruiting is getting cut out, due to budget constraints, due to schedules, due to whatever, a ton of, and due to the transfer portal. So a ton of face-to-face recruiting is getting lost somewhere along the way. So it's imperative for high school athletes to take the opportunities to get in front of coaches, go to the clinics, go to the showcases and the camps, get out in front of the people. The only thing is you have to understand as a high school athlete, and now a lot of the remainder of the show is going to switch to a message to high school prospects. Where can I shed some light in this? A, I was a college football coach. B, I was a recruiting coordinator to two institutions. That I've seen it. I've worked with it. The thing to know when you're going to these is you're thinking, I want to go get seen. So does everybody else. You have to be smart about your approach. Be sure to talk to as many coaches as you can, but also focus on the work talking for you. Right? I can't tell you how many times I'd go and I'd watch this high school talent, quote unquote talent, that was more focused on exerting energy, talking to me and to the coaches around me, more so than exerting energy into the drill. Go run your best 40. Go do your best shuttle. And I'm not saying that, you know, the 40 and the shuttle and all this stuff. I was looking at other things. I'd stand usually like at the 10-yard line and try to get it, or the 10-yard distance wherever you're running your 40. But, that 10-yard burst sometimes is almost more important than the 40. So I'm not saying that the 40 is crucial, or your shuttle time is crucial, or your broad jump is crucial. But go exert your energy in those, and then talk to me, and let me talk to you. That's the political game for high schoolers. I mean, it doesn't all. Sometimes it does. You know, a lot of, and this is gonna sound like a down, putting statement, but it's not. A lot of Division 3 schools will take that because what are they needing? Enrollment numbers. Sure, if you're interested in us, we'll talk. But when you're at the scholarship level, I'm not looking for politicians. I'm looking for football players. So I'm going to go. If I didn't pursue a conversation with you, 9.5 chances out of 10, I'm not going to recruit you. So don't waste my time. Don't waste your time either, because I'm sure there are coaches that are looking for you. Sometimes I see something differently. Maybe I missed on it. I'm not saying I was perfect in my evaluation skills, but there are times that you're just not what we're looking for. And that's okay, because somebody else is looking for that. Be sure to take any kind of attention, seriously. And on top of that too, and it's not a absolute negative, because I took advantage of this in both ways. Camps are also kind of coaches convention clinic 2.0, where we're gonna go. Yeah, we're gonna bring back prospect list, but I'm gonna go hang out with my buddies. Right. The cool thing about coaching is 9 chances out of 10 you know somebody here or there that you link up and you just fellowship and spend some time. But on top of that too, as a young coach, it's a good time to get out and, hey, I'll run this drill for you, I'll do this, because it's an interview. These coaches can see how you coach, and it leads to some opportunities, and it leads to some opportunities, and just the ability to the 3, 2, 1 just leads to a ton of opportunities for coaches, as well as athletes. But it's long days, they're hot days, they can be miserable. Sometimes you're traveling up and down the state and you're trying to figure stuff out. Playbook editing and wrapping up the summer comes next for coaches. You're going on vacation, you're getting one thing that I tried to do, we get our playbook situated. I'd try to the best of my ability, if we had our at least our face done, our practice face, which is your schedule, how you're operating practice. If we had that done, I tried to have all of my stuff scheduled. A ton of times it wasn't done. A ton of times, and a lot of this is pending too, is your install schedule done, because sometimes you were ahead of the game as a staff and had it. Sometimes, let's get it after vacation. So sometimes you couldn't get, your camp stuff done, or you knew I was going to have X amount of time. I kind of have an idea of how we're going to install things, so I can get at least the first little bit. Any kind of work you can do to get ahead of the game. That's kind of what I did next, would do. Some coaches are different, but that was, you're getting paid to work in the summer, you might as well get it. And that's kind of it as far as that goes. I'm sure I missed something. And we're, this is going to be kind of part of a smaller series, maybe, on some coaching things. So, I'm sure we can revisit some things, but that's really, a brief recap of the spring into summer. Now we're going to kind of shift over. Kate brought this idea up about, and we kind of talked about high school athletes, and what can you do at this point in time. And I'm sure once we get into the fall and some different things, a lot of this will come back up. But I think this is a really interesting topic in the current right now time frame. Spring and summer needs to be your best friend. Live in the weight room, and I do put in a parenthesis here in my notes, um, which can sometimes be overrated. And I know I can catch some backlash for that. So let me explain. Okay, the weight room is not overrated. You need the weight room. You have to work towards goals in the weight room. But the weight room and the goals and the achievements you make, and where I say it can almost be overrated, it's overrated for the people who only do weight room things. Your workout exercise coach is called a strength and conditioning coach. So you have to hit the field. All that stuff in the work you put in the weight room does you no good if muscularly you can't move. And that's not just in speed, that's in lateral, side to side, change of direction, different things like that. You have to hit the field. You have to put field work in. That's in conditioning, and that's in just learning your trade. You know, there's all this stuff. The world of technology has changed the game to where everything is at your fingertips. Pay attention, research, find drills. There's all these drills on YouTube and stuff. I mean, honestly, maybe it makes me sound bad, but that's where I got a ton of my stuff from, was YouTube. And, okay, well, I need to do this. I'm hitting YouTube. And okay, I like that. We kind of do, I've done something like this. Can I incorporate the two? Go on YouTube, research your craft, and put it into practice, and then go to the showcases and the camps that we just talked about. And go to those ready to learn. Coaches a lot of time are gonna share their advice and share their wisdom. Be ready to take it and be ready to accept it. In the near future, and this is kind of looking ahead, so bear with me here, but go to game day visits. Oftentimes, and I saw a video that disgusted me on, frankly. This kid, and he's a local kid, so I know he'll maybe never see this, but he's going to, I'm ranking and granted, I say it disgusted me. It's his opinion, and he's entitled to it. But you can kind of get a gist off of the interest he got, because there's a ton of Division 3, and again, when I say that, it's not to downplay Division 3, but in the world of the transfer portal, you never know when offers are going to get pulled. You never know when they're just not going to come. So you have to be ready and willing to take whatever opportunities you can get, is kind of what I'm going at. Don't think don't, no, I'm too good for that. Because you may be too good for that, but then you're sitting at a JUCO, never getting picked up. Versus get your foot in the door, you can leave. And maybe I was wrong for it, but that was one of my recruiting tools at St. Vincent is, hey, come get a year or two of film and then go. I'm not holding you hostage. You can transfer, but come get some good quality. There's not a ton of JUCOs around here. You're going to drive to California? You're going to drive to NIMI? You're going to go to Arizona? You're going to go to Texas? There's not a ton of JUCOs around us that, Kansas. You're going to drive to Kansas? You're going to leave everything and drive to Kansas? Come play football here and get some film and leave. Don't prematurely respond to any kind of interest. Get, one piece of advice I'd give is I'd have recruits that I'd be talking to or were talking to me that would send weekly highlight tapes from, week 2 against Ambridge Area High School, week 3 against Central Valley, week 4 against, week 4 against Hopewell, week 4, however you did it, and they'd be sending them and texting them and messaging them. I'm not going to watch a week by week highlight tape. Maybe some coaches do, I don't. But where I would encourage you to do is to do weekly cut-ups, so that when you get to the time frame of sending highlights out, mid-season, postseason, so that's following the regular season, following playoffs, full season highlights, different things like that, you have cut-ups. So do cut up weekly, don't send them out. And I'll tell you why, and this is kind of a tip I give on here. One thing to consider, okay, and again, maybe it makes me an arrogant schmuck, but if you didn't grab my attention in the first 3 plays of your highlight tape, if something didn't grab my, if I, okay, like I gotta keep watching, if that didn't happen in the first 3 plays, I turned you off. Why? Because coaches have too much time and have the ability to recruit too much talent now. If I don't see something in 3 plays, and I'm not saying just raw natural talent, I'm saying, is there something there? Is there any kind of potential there? Because I'll watch you. But if I see nothing, if I just see another guy that can run the football, and when I say that, I mean doesn't show, I can break tackles, I can be explosive. Explosive plays are huge. If you don't show that, I'm gone. And another thing, I love special teams. I was a special teams guy. I'm a believer in special teams. If you come at me with a special teams clip in those first 3 clips, I turn you off immediately. If you're and unless you give some context, like if you have a blurb, something to win the game or something. I don't know. That shows, okay, we made something happen. If it's just another kick return, and I've seen it where, yeah, it's a return. You didn't score on it. You got 30. It is a 30-yard return, which is a 30-yard return, but that's not a highlight, especially in the first 3 clips. If it's a non-essential to your team's success clip of special teams in the first 3 plays, I'm X'd off. If you open up with a 30-yard kick return, I'm not watching it. I don't know how far you get. It's because I'm done. If you can't show me that you can play the game of football, I can't. I got too much time. And on top of that, something to consider, very controversial topic here. And this will be the last point I make for this episode. Again, we'll talk more about this, but controversial topic that I'll leave you with. Let me know your thoughts. In the world of the transfer portal, college football coaches don't need the high school talent. They don't. And I know that every successful program is built on your depth. Where do you typically get that depth from? High school recruiting. So I apologize and ask for forgiveness in advance, but high school or college coaches don't need to, and I'm not waiting on you anymore. And we told that to players, hey, if I offer, and we told it to transfers too, so it's not just a high school recruiting point. If we make you an offer, whether that's a walk-on spot or a scholarship spot, you're on the shot clock, because you don't control me anymore. It used to be where, we need these high school guys because we can't get the depth, we can't get the talent. I can go to a junior college. We talked about JUCOs earlier. I can go to a JUCO. I can go get the talent. I don't need you. So, if I can offer any advice, asterisk with that is don't get talked into something you don't want to do, right? Because a lot of coaches now will pressure you. If you're not ready to make that decision, then that's obviously not the place for you. I've been a firm believer in most things in life. When you found blank, I met Kate. I gave up a career and would do it all over again because I met this girl, and something's different here. I need to see where this goes. And I walk. We've talked about it, but when the one has come across. When you found the place that you want to spend the next 1 to 4 years at. Maybe in some instances 5 to 6 years, right? So be attentive to that. Don't get talked into something, but also know that coach doesn't have to wait on you like coaches historically had to. They don't have to do that anymore. They can move on. So be attentive to that. Pay attention. Talk to people, communicate. There's a ton of resources out there. There are a ton of experienced people in now, recruiting and offering recruiting help and advice. And I'm sure there's podcasts. There's YouTube. If there's YouTube videos for drills and training, you better believe there's recruiting advice podcasts. Go see them. Go go out. And if this is something you want to do, pursue it. But be sure to put the effort necessary into it. Okay. That'll be the advice that I leave you with today. Hopefully something was of interest. If you disagree with something, if any of my coaching friends disagree with something, please put it in the comments, let me know, and we'll talk about it as we go. We are going to, shift towards more of this kind of content. Hopefully you enjoy it. Hopefully it gives you a little bit of insight. Make sure you follow us on our social medias, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Find us wherever you catch your podcasts. Make sure you follow us along on YouTube. We will see you next week. As always, keep thinking. See you next time.